Join us as we explore some of the darkest and most haunting tragedies in human history. From acts of enormous cruelty to accidents with horrible consequences, these stories show that we live surrounded by danger, and fate, choice, and circumstance can lead to the worst imaginable ends. In 1981, David Allen Kerwin was a 24-year-old from La Cañada, Flint Ridge, California, who loved to travel. A student at Pasadena City College, David balanced his studies with construction work and managing apartment complexes. The young man spent his free time traveling and exploring the outdoors. An athletic, adventurous, and compassionate man, David grew up in a close-knit family that owned 3 dogs. Creatures David often took care of with genuine affection. It was his love for these animals that ultimately brought his demise. On a sunny day in July 1981, David embarked on what seemed like a serene adventure in Yellowstone National Park, accompanied by his friends Ronald Ratliff and Moosey, Ronald's mixed-breed boxer. None of them could have foreseen the tragedy that would unfold that afternoon. David was nearing the end of a camping trip that had taken him through Northern California and Canada. On July 20th, he and Ronald arrived at the Fountain Paint Pot Thermal Area in Yellowstone. They stopped to explore and admire the park's famous hot springs. But as the friends ventured a short distance from their truck, Moosey broke away and darted toward Celestine Pool, a striking but dangerously hot thermal spring where water temperatures often exceed 200 degrees Fahrenheit. For unknown reasons, Moosey leaped into the pool, and her yelps pierced the serene landscape. Panicked, Ronald and David rushed toward the spring. Witnesses nearby watched in growing alarm as the scene unfolded. David, visibly distressed, seemed determined to save the dog despite the obvious danger. When Ronald urged him not to enter the spring to attempt a rescue, David remained resolute. Ignoring the warning, he stepped into the scalding water and dove headfirst into the boiling spring. The moment David entered the near-boiling waters, his fate was sealed. He swam toward Moosey, reaching her and attempting to pull her to safety. However, the scalding temperatures overwhelmed him. After releasing the dog, David struggled to resurface. Ronald acted quickly, rushing to his friend's aid and pulling him from the pool, despite sustaining second-degree burns to his own feet in the process. Witnesses gathered around the severely injured David, moving him to a nearby clear area as they waited for emergency responders. But his condition was harrowing. His skin had turned pale, his hair was falling out in clumps, and he had lost his vision. One bystander, attempting to remove his shoes, found that his skin peeled away with the fabric. Covered in third-degree burns over 100% of his body, David remained conscious and in immense pain. He was reportedly aware of the gravity of his actions and acknowledged the recklessness of what he had done. Emergency services rushed David to West Yellowstone Airport, where he was airlifted to the Intermountain Burn Center in Salt Lake City, Utah. Despite extensive medical efforts, the severity of his burns proved fatal. David succumbed to his injuries the following morning, having endured hours of unimaginable pain. His heroic attempt to save Moosey ultimately cost him his life. Moosey tragically did not survive the ordeal either. She succumbed almost instantly to the boiling water. Her body never recovered from the pool. Celestine Pool, like many of the park's hot springs, is deceptively beautiful but lethally hot, with temperatures high enough to cause severe burns within moments. Park officials have long warned visitors to exercise caution in these areas, as the thermal features, though stunning, pose extreme risks. David's father, James Kerwin, reflected on his son's love for life and his deep compassion for others. He recalled how David had a fondness for dogs, and when a dog went into the spring, despite his friend's warning, David went in to rescue it. According to James, David had led a happy and fulfilling life and had always enjoyed traveling whenever he had the opportunity. Jill Greninger was a devoted mother, partner, and friend who brought joy and warmth to everyone she encountered. At 35 years old, the woman from Williamsport, Pennsylvania, was deeply rooted in her family, cherishing time with her 3 children and eagerly anticipating the arrival of her first grandchild. But on April 22, 2019, a devastating accident ended her life far too soon. That day, Jill reported to work at Economy Locker Storage Company, Incorporated, a food processing plant in Pennsdale, Pennsylvania, where she had been employed. The facility, which had operated since the early 1900s, specialized in meat processing and the sale of meat. Jill was standing on a set of movable stairs positioned next to an industrial meat grinder, a massive machine used to process large quantities of meat. The grinder was approximately 6 feet off the ground, requiring workers to stand elevated to perform tasks associated with its operation. It was 11:40 a.m. that day when an incident that no one could have anticipated unfolded. Jill either fell or was pulled into the grinder while performing her duties. There were no direct witnesses to the accident, and the exact circumstances remain unclear. Lycoming County Coroner Charles Kiesling, Jr. later noted the possibility that she may have been reaching for something in the machine when the tragic event occurred. Another employee became alarmed after hearing strange noises emanating from the grinder. Upon inspection, the worker discovered the horrifying scene and immediately called for emergency assistance. By the time the first police officers and firefighters arrived, Jill was already gone. Volunteer firefighters worked tirelessly to disassemble the grinder, spending more than 45 minutes carefully recovering her remains. It was a grueling and heartbreaking task, leaving those on the scene visibly shaken. Coroner Kiesling described the accident as horrible and emphasized the shocking nature of such a tragedy. He explained that the victim had died inside the moving parts of the machine. Friends, family, and colleagues were left grappling with the profound loss. Many remembered Jill as an amazing person who touched so many lives. Her untimely death also prompted an investigation by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, a division of the United States Department of Labor. OSHA's inquiry revealed 11 serious violations at the Economy Locker Storage Company, leading to a fine of $49,062 in October 2019. Among the violations were failures to ensure adequate safety measures and protections for workers operating heavy machinery. While the company declined to comment on the investigation, the findings underscored the critical importance of workplace safety. Jill's death marked the first fatality reported at the plant, but its impact extended far beyond the facility. Her family, including her parents, David and Linda Heller, and her 5 siblings, were left mourning a life cut tragically short. Jill's partner Jack and her 3 children, Sarah, Dominic, and John, faced the unimaginable task of moving forward without the woman who had been the center of their world. For those who knew and loved Jill, the focus remained on remembering her vibrant spirit, boundless love for her family, and the joy she brought to so many. Her friend Aaron Schreffler expressed poignantly that the impact of her life had touched so many others, offering a heartfelt tribute as she mourned the loss. Jill Greninger is remembered for her fun-loving nature and willingness to help others, and for her knack for lighting up any room she entered. According to her family, the woman's life revolved around her loved ones, whether she was cheering on her children at sporting events or enjoying a quiet game of shuffleboard with her partner, Jack Stannard, of 11 years. In 1916, Grigory Yefimovich Rasputin was a man whose name struck fear and fascination into the hearts of the Russian nobility. To many history lovers, Rasputin's reputation still holds a mysterious aura. Known as a mystic and faith healer, his influence over the Russian imperial family earned him both reverence and resentment. But as whispers of his uncanny powers grew louder and his influence over the royals became stronger, so too did the determination of his enemies to silence him. On the night of December 30th, 1916, their ambitions came to fruition in an event that has sparked many speculations over the years. Born to a peasant family in the Siberian village of Pokrovskoye, Rasputin's early life offered little indication of his eventual notoriety. It was a religious conversion in 1897 that set him on a path of wandering and spiritual discovery. Although he wasn't a formal member of the church, by the early 1900s, he had gained a reputation as a charismatic mystic. In 1905, Rasputin's life took a pivotal turn when he met Emperor Nicholas II and Empress Alexandra Feodorovna. The empress, desperate for a cure for her son Alexei, who suffered from a rare disease that didn't allow his blood to clot properly, believed Rasputin's prayers could save the boy. His seeming ability to alleviate Alexei's suffering earned him a place of trust within the imperial family. But while Rasputin was revered by the empress and seen by some as a holy man, many in the Russian aristocracy viewed him as a dangerous charlatan who conned the royals. They resented the sway he held over Alexandra, especially after Nicholas left to oversee the military during World War I. Rasputin's influence attracted huge criticism, as Russia's defeats on the battlefield and domestic unrest deepened the empire's crisis. By 1916, his enemies concluded that his removal was necessary to save the monarchy, and in their view, the nation itself. On the night of December 30th, 1916, a group of conspirators led by Prince Felix Yusupov, Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich, and Vladimir Purishkevich executed their plan to eliminate Rasputin. According to Yusupov's account, Rasputin was lured to the Moika Palace under the pretense of meeting Yusupov's wife, Irina, who was not present. In the palace basement, Rasputin was allegedly offered tea, cakes, and Madeira wine, all laced with cyanide. Despite consuming the poisoned items, Rasputin seemed unaffected, much to Yusupov's disbelief. Frustrated, Yusupov retrieved a revolver and shot Rasputin in the chest, leaving him collapsed on the floor. The conspirators, assuming him dead, left the room. But when Yusupov returned to confirm the death, Rasputin suddenly lunged at him, clawing and staggering toward the palace courtyard. There, Purishkevich fired additional shots, one of which struck Rasputin fatally in the forehead. The conspirators wrapped his body in cloth, drove it to the Petrovsky Bridge, and threw it into the icy Little Nevka River. Rasputin's end was an immediate subject of controversy and speculation. Rumors swirled that water had been found in Rasputin's lungs, suggesting he was still alive when thrown into the river and ultimately drowned. However, official autopsy reports did not support this claim. They indicated that Rasputin had been killed by gunshot wounds, with no evidence of poisoning or drowning. The drama and mystery of the night were likely amplified by Yusupov in his later memoirs, where he painted the events of that day as a titanic struggle between good and evil. Public reaction to Rasputin's death was divided. Among the nobility, Yusupov and his co-conspirators were celebrated as heroes for removing a man they believed had corrupted the imperial court. Yet their actions had unintended consequences. Nicholas II, already out of touch with his people, banished Yusupov and Dmitry from the court, which ironically shielded them from the upheavals of the Russian Revolution that followed. Among the Russian peasantry, Rasputin's death was viewed as a tragedy. Many saw him as a champion of the common man, a peasant who had ascended to the inner circle of power, only to be struck down by the aristocracy. The monarchy, already teetering on the brink, fell within months as the revolution swept away centuries of Romanov rule. In death, Rasputin became larger than life. His violent end cemented his place in history as a symbol of mysticism, corruption, and the final days of Imperial Russia. To this day, the circumstances of his death remain clouded by myth, a chilling legend that endures. In January 2016, Xi'an, a Chinese city celebrated for its ancient terracotta warriors, was shaken by a horrific discovery that cast a chilling shadow over its modern high-rises. What unfolded was not only a tale of negligence, but also a grim reminder of the human cost of oversight and isolation. Wu, a woman in her late 30s or early 40s, was a quiet resident of her apartment complex, living alone on the 15th floor. Wu led an unassuming life, allegedly struggling with mental illness. Her solitude went unnoticed. This fatal combination of neglect and isolation would culminate in a tragedy that shocked the nation. It all began on January 30th, 2016, when the elevator in Wu's building malfunctioned, coming to a halt between the 10th and 11th floors. Maintenance workers were called to address the issue, but their response proved insufficient. Instead of conducting a thorough inspection of the elevator cab, the workers reportedly knocked on the doors and shouted to check if anyone was inside. Hearing no response, they assumed the lift was empty, cut its power, and left for the Lunar New Year holiday. The elevator, with Wu still trapped inside, was effectively abandoned. For over 30 days, Wu remained imprisoned in the small, dark space. Investigators later reported that her hands were mangled, and the walls bore scratch marks, haunting evidence of her desperate attempts to escape. Trapped without food or water, she succumbed to dehydration and starvation in what must have been a slow and agonizing death. It wasn't until March 1st, when workers returned to repair the elevator, that Wu's body was discovered. The gruesome scene, her decomposed body slumped within the cab, sent shockwaves through the building's residents and the wider public. Local police, ruling out foul play, classified her death as a result of gross negligence. The two maintenance workers responsible for shutting down the elevator were arrested and charged with involuntary manslaughter. The tragedy ignited a wave of public outrage. Residents of the building expressed both fear and fury, staging protests against the property management company. Many described the building's maintenance as chronically substandard, with complaints about frequently broken elevators and other issues often ignored. A resident surnamed Ding confessed to being haunted by the incident, explaining that it had left a shadow across his heart, bringing fear and unease. Questions arose about how someone could remain missing for over a month without family or neighbors raising alarms. While Wu's family had reported her missing, reports suggest they believed she had merely wandered off, and no concerted efforts were made to locate her. The timing of the incident during the Lunar New Year holiday added another layer to the tragedy. In China, the extended holiday period often results in significant disruptions to services as workers travel to their hometowns. However, critics argued that the lengthy delay in addressing the elevator's malfunction went far beyond typical holiday disruptions. Media and citizens alike decried the lack of diligence, with many blaming a culture of cutting corners and prioritizing convenience over safety. Wu's death served as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of negligence and the fragility of human life when systems fail. In late October 1994, a tragedy unfolded in Union, South Carolina that would shock the nation. Susan Lee Smith, a 23-year-old mother, appeared on national television, pleading tearfully for the safe return of her two young sons, Michael, age 3, and Alexander, just 14 months old. Her story was one of terror and heartbreak. She claimed to have been carjacked at gunpoint by a black man who drove off with her children in the back seat of her 1990 Mazda Protege. The community rallied to support her, with vigils, flyers, and a massive manhunt spanning 9 days. The horrifying truth, however, was far more devastating than anyone could have imagined. Law enforcement officers grew suspicious of inconsistencies in Susan's story almost instantly. Her description of the alleged carjacking scene was particularly doubtful. She claimed to have been stopped at a red light at an isolated intersection, yet investigators determined the traffic light would not have turned red unless another vehicle was present. A polygraph test further revealed discrepancies, and detectives began to focus their search on nearby lakes and ponds, suspecting Susan knew more than she let on. 9 days after little Michael and Alexander were reported missing, the chilling truth came to light. Susan confessed that she had driven her car to a boat ramp at John D. Long Lake, released the parking brake, and allowed the vehicle to roll into the water with her children strapped inside. As the car floated for 6 minutes and then slowly sank, Susan stood by, watching, making no attempt to save Michael or Alexander. When the car was retrieved from the lake, some of the law enforcement officers on the scene started crying. Inside were Michael and Alexander, still strapped into their car seats alongside Susan's wedding dress and family photo album, objects that symbolized the life she had chosen to discard. The nation, too, recoiled in horror at the betrayal. The mother who had tearfully pleaded for help had, in reality, taken the lives of her two small children. The motive behind Susan's heinous act was later revealed to be rooted in her personal life. She had been pursuing a romantic relationship with Tom Findlay, the wealthy son of her employer. Findlay had ended the relationship, stating in a letter that he did not want children. Wanting to rekindle the romance, Susan decided her sons were an obstacle that had to be dealt with. Susan's trial in 1995 gave an insight into her mental state. Her defense attorneys argued that Susan was deeply depressed and wanted to end her own life. They claimed she intended to die alongside her sons, but had been unable to follow through. Prosecutors, however, painted a darker picture. They argued that Susan's actions were deliberate and calculated, driven by her desire to pursue a child-free life with Findlay. The jury took just 2.5 hours to find her guilty, ultimately sparing her the death penalty and sentencing her to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Michael and Alexander's father, David Smith, who had initially stood by Susan during her televised pleas, expressed his devastation after discovering the truth. Over the decades, David had remained vocal in his opposition to Susan's parole, emphasizing the irreparable harm her actions caused. He stated during her parole hearing in 2024 that she had purposely meant to end their lives and that he had never felt any remorse from her. Susan's incarceration has been fraught with controversy. She has faced disciplinary actions for inappropriate relationships with prison guards and drug possession. Her parole eligibility in November 2024 was denied, with the board ensuring her continued imprisonment. Michael and Alexander's lives, cut brutally short, stand as a solemn testament to lost innocence.